Derek, thank you so much for taking the time to share some of your insights with our community of leaders. Before we begin, do you want to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what your role entails at Poka?
Yeah, sure. So I'm the Director of Customer Success at Poka. So I have the pleasure of leading our customer success managers, partner success manager, and customer support lead. So I cover a few functions and, joined them, I guess, about 9 months ago now.
Wow. And did you start using Fellow as soon as you joined Poka, or how long ago did you start using the tool?
Well, it's funny because I was at my previous company for over 5 years, and in that, you get used to using a certain tech stack. And when I came in, Poka had a lot of different tools, but a lot of people were already using Fellow. And I said, the team that I inherited was using it. So I'm like, okay, I better figure out how this works. And I was so impressed just how much easier it made my life. So I've definitely adopted it. It helps a lot of other people at Poka also use it. So they definitely has some scaling effects there in terms of the more people use it, the better it is. So yeah, been using it right since the beginning.
That is great to hear. So, the name of this series is called The Art of the Meeting. And I wanted to ask you about one specific meeting that you run using Fellow. So if you had to pick one meeting, perhaps your favorite one to run, to host, which one would that be?
Yeah, I guess we could do one of two, you tell me, but I use it, I think what I do every week is Sunday night, I kind of set my priorities for the week, and Monday morning is kind of my working time to organize the week. And I kind of use Fellow to prep for all the different meetings I have. So the two biggest ones would be our team meeting that we host Mondays at 11 for the whole team, and then for the individual one-on-ones that we have weekly. So it can go in either direction, but both are definitely great. I find it very helpful to use it for.
Yes. So personally, I would love to learn more about your customer success team meeting. How does that happen? Do you have a template for that? Who attends?
Yeah, again, I think we're still trying to develop it further, but the way we do have a template that we use that replaces every week. So in there, first, everyone can identify their top 3 priorities for the week. So one of the repeated tasks is before the meeting, you're supposed to put that in. And that just saves a bit of time because I can then quickly glance in and see, and I put mine as well for visibility for the team. But each person has their top 3 priorities, which again, if I'm traveling one week too, I can also check that. We then have a few sections that we use. So one will be wins. So we try to start with whatever wins or great things that happen that people can share. And then we'll use the main area to add any items. So I may add some, other team members may add. We also have some sections around challenges and then also best practices to share. I wouldn't say we always do that, but the goal is if there is anything to highlight to the team or something that's working really well, that the team can highlight that in that forum. And then we can document the action items, and obviously because it continues week by week, we have that kind of record for the team as we move forward. And yeah, so I find as the week goes and things come up I want to talk to the team about, I'll document that in the Fellow for the next week, and then the morning of I'll validate, because I think sometimes it's easy to put too many things on the agenda or want to cover too many items, but at the end of the day people can only adjust so much. So I kind of will collect all of it, and then Monday morning or Friday afternoon make sense of it in terms of, okay, what actually are the most important things for us to cover? How much time do we estimate them taking? What have other people submitted that they would like to cover? And then what do we want to prioritize within that? So yeah, we definitely use it live within the meeting, and it certainly helps us, and again, I think we have room to improve, of course, but I think it's helped us at least create some structure for those discussions.
I like that. And I like that you mentioned that this is just an iteration of the meeting. Like we believe at Fellow that meetings are something you should continuously be testing, improving, right? Just like a product. So how did you arrive to this version of your meeting? Why do you have a section for priorities, wins, challenges, and those sections that you were explaining before?
Well, I think it's also, as you said, meetings evolve, and also our team has evolved. When I came in, it was myself and 3 or 4 people. And now we're soon going to have myself plus 10 people. So it's a bigger team. So adding the priorities there certainly helps, just because in some cases, we may not have a weekly one-on-one with each person, like it might be bi-weekly. So that kind of just helps frame up, okay, and forces everyone to have that conversation with themselves in terms of what are those priorities. I think from a culture perspective, I really believe in sharing success. So the wins is a really important part that we've tried to institute where we can. You know, the challenges, I think we don't always have time, but when we can, those are important. I think to just, are there any elephants in the room? Are there things that, you know, others want to add on that aren't working that we need to kind of dive deeper into? And then I don't know if we do as many best practices, but that's something we're doing more of our team QBRs. Like next week we're in Montreal and we're going to do some best practice sharing in that format. So I think it's definitely evolving, and I think it's still probably a little too like, where I have too many items, but in the future I'd mention it where more other people are also contributing more ideas or agenda topics as our middle management scales out and other people are taking ownership for different strategic priorities and initiatives. So yeah, it's a work in progress, and it's different. It's certainly different when you, like at the beginning when there was 4 or 5 of us, and now there's going to be 10 or 11 of us. Like, just, you want to make sure it's meaningful to each person. Again, I have a few people on my team that are in different functions, not CS. So like how to make sure it's relevant for them, or okay, maybe in some cases they don't need to stick around for the whole meeting. You know, someone said something to me once, which is, if you have a bunch of people in a meeting, that's an expensive meeting, right? And so, you know, we don't want to waste an hour of 10 people's times. That's 10 hours that could be spent on something more productive if the meeting isn't relevant. So it should have a purpose. Otherwise, you know, that, I think another thing too that's involved with the pandemic is, you know, we're a remote first company, as a lot of tech companies are, and you know, we get together maybe once a quarter, but we don't have that in-person interaction that much. So we do try to take some time at the beginning just to catch up socially, and that's important. It's easy, and I find myself sometimes, okay, we have a big agenda we need to cover, but that connection matters. So I think we do also try to, even though it's not formally on the agenda, take some time to chat, you know, especially as we kick off the week together.
Yeah, those are some great best practices. Personally, I like to have an icebreaker section at the top of the agenda. So sometimes people in the team rotate like who picks the icebreaker, and it's another way to start the meeting with a little bit of fun and break the ice, like you said at the beginning of the conversation.
And it's interesting too, especially because like you have an existing team and then you have new people that are joining throughout, and you're trying to integrate them into the team, and how to best do that, you know. There's no perfect way, so icebreakers might be a good way to continue doing that.
So my last question for you, Derek, is we like to ask leaders what the purpose of the meeting is. So what would you say is the purpose of your weekly team meeting, and how do you want people to leave? How do you want them to feel after this meeting every week?
Yeah, it's a great question, and we actually just went through some training on this for our meetings that we have with customers, and part of what we talked about is what's the end state we want from the meeting, and then what's the supporting agenda to get to that end state. I think with a team meeting, it's a little more complicated because there's a lot of other moving parts, but I would say one, being that remote, is connection, that people feel connected to each other on the team. I think a second piece is alignment, right? There's a lot of moving parts in the business, and there's different things that need to be communicated, so communication, alignment, and also some sort of forward momentum. One thing I tell my whole team is, you know, we're building this customer success program together. And so that's going to be through each person's involvement, and it's going to iterate. It's not going to be suddenly tomorrow it's perfect. We need to consistently every week make it better. So the team meeting should play some role in that, in terms of us making some changes or having some discussion that can make us better. So, you know, my hope is coming out of the meeting, people are excited, they're ready to go for the week, and we're ready to go. So
that's awesome. It sounds like you've put a lot of thought into your team meetings, and it's great to hear that leaders like you are doing this to improve the experience for people.
Well, Fellow helps us a lot with this. I find like I save so much time each week just because we're able to, like, again, I set aside time every Monday morning, and I go through each meeting in my calendar, and Fellow allows me a chance to think about it. Like, what is it that we want to achieve in that meeting. I can add items, and then the other people add items. So when I get to a one-on-one with a team member, they've suggested items, I've suggested items. We both put some thought into it. We're not just showing up for a meeting because there's a meeting in the calendar. So I think Fellow really helps us with being thoughtful going into any meeting that we have.
That's great to hear. And I think a great place to end this conversation. Thank you, Derek, so much for sharing your advice with other leaders in our community.